Liberty Nation with Tim Donner.
And we are back with one more shot at you in this special year-end edition of Liberty Nation Radio, joined by Lisa K. Donner, editor-in-chief of LibertyNation.com, and Scott Cosenza, legal affairs editor at same, LibertyNation.com. So, Scott, I don't know, do you want to start with the three biggest victories for liberty in 2019 and then leave our listeners on a downer with the defeats, or do you want to go the other way around?
I take my medicine first, Tim. Let's go with the losses.
Okay.
Number one, perhaps the biggest, is the vaping. The war against vaping that we've seen, the demonization of vaping, which is used by many Americans to take a more healthy choice rather than smoking combustible tobacco in order to get their nicotine. And the restrictions that we've seen and again, the demonization of it, I think, has been a real loss. And the way that so many Americans seem to be willing to give up their liberty and not demand that the do-gooders present solid information if they have it to offer and let adults make up their own mind. If I was a conspiracy theorist, Tim, I might say that the big tobacco companies are against the many smaller vaping companies, which have yet to coalesce around, one market winner.
Okay, number two, in defeats for individual liberty in 2019.
Well, I think it's the attempt to eliminate the gig economy in California. We've seen now at the end of this year so many Californians are going to be out of a job because their job doesn't fit the notion of a W-2 income. And so whether it's Uber drivers or freelance journalists and all sorts of other people who make their money in ways that the people in Sacramento disapprove of, but do so honestly and for the benefit of positive exchange with another, I think that's a real loss. And it's a shame that the citizens of California, in spite of all that we see with their loss of civil liberties and what it means, the creation of the two societies there of rich and poor, this seems to just be another nail in that coffin.
Number three.
Tariffs, Tim. I know that we differ in this area, but I think that Donald Trump's use of tariffs to try to enforce his will on foreign countries so that they may open their markets to American goods needlessly and probably unconstitutionally discriminates against the buying wishes of the American public. It's a discrimination if you wanted to buy product A from a domestic source versus, or if you wanted to buy product B from a foreign source, to require you to pay a confiscatory tax on product B is an infringement on your liberty as an American to purchase a good or service from who you wish to.
I think we've had a terrible trade situation, and it had to be rectified. I think Trump did what he had to do, and some tariffs were applied, but I believe that now China is coming to the table. We now have USMCA. I think that's basically chump change in what's going to happen with the economy.
It's important to point out, Scott, that Trump is not tariff happy. He's using tariffs as a vehicle to get
an instrument.
China to
this discussion,
drop
Tim,
the
that
barriers.
we're having is the reason why it's on my losses list. It's because I believe the perception is that they have worked. And I don't think that's a good perception because I think it's going to yield the increased imposition of more tariffs in the future.
I will point out that we now have an economy where there are 1.2 million,
Really? Yeah.
1.2 million more jobs than there are people to fill them.
Yeah.
All right, let's close on an up note. Victories for individual liberty in 2019. Fire away.
I think, Tim, that the biggest win is the decreasing of drug prohibition pressure across the United States, whether it comes chiefly in the form of marijuana and all the guises where it's prohibited. We've seen, as we talked about on this show before, the Safe Access Project in Philadelphia, where heroin and opioid users are being approached more as a health policy issue rather than a criminal justice policy issue. To the extent that we can retreat from that prohibition, just like the alcohol prohibition, I think it's a great win for liberty.
Number two on the list of victories for liberty.
Well, I think it's the success of Tulsi Gabbard. That a person whose, I think, main policy goal is to decrease our dependence on foreign wars and lust for same. As a person who's a veteran of those, I think that's a great win for liberty, because we need more of that that kind of leadership to get us away from those things.
I think she's an up-and-comer. I really do. And I think she strikes a chord with the center of America.
I agree. And now, let's conclude with the final, what you consider to be triumphant victory for individual liberty in 2019.
Well,
Scott.
this is a perhaps, Tim. We'll have to see through 2020 if this develops.
This is a hopeful.
Tim, I had an interview this week with Larry Klayman, the famous lawyer who now represents George Zimmerman in the, you'll remember, of the Trayvon Martin case. And there is new information that's been alleged where the state's attorney in Florida essentially conspired with some of the attorneys and the Martin family to basically lie about the presence of a certain witness named Brittany Diamond Eugene, who was the real person that he was on the phone with. And that's important, Tim, I think, because that was the start of the Black Lives Matter movement, and it did a great deal towards adding to the racial tension in this country, which, you know, we all thought, I think, at the dawn of the Obama presidency by 2020 would be waning considerably, but seems to have only amped up. So anything that I think we can do to get away from these tribal or racial identity politics is a good thing. And if the seeds of some of that movement can be shown to have been poisoned, then I think it's a boon for liberty.